It's,
Okay, starting
it's corrupted.
recording. Okay, so welcome. And let's start this out right away. You get to see my face. What I did here, I got to move this to the side so I can see my whole screen. I just put something together that has the whole itinerary. Yes, it's very busy, but sort of gives a chance. So we did February 1st, arrive in Jerusalem last week. And so the Israel Museum, that's where they had the model of the ancient city. That was cool. The Pools of Bethesda, Church of St. Anne, and then the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall. On Thursday, we went up the Mount of Olives, Palm Sunday Road, down to actually the church where Jesus wept, and then the Garden of Gethsemane. Then we went over to St. Peter in Gallico. That's by Caiaphas's palace, and would have been where Peter denied Jesus. Then we went over to the upper room, the Abbey of the Dormition, where one of the places that it said that Mary fell asleep or died, and was assumed into heaven. And then we were in that excavation along the western wall, that tunnel, and seeing some from back that far. Then on the Friday the 14th, last week we went to the Holocaust Memorial, and then Good Shepherd Church in Jericho. Lunch was there. Mount of Temptation behind it, and then went down swimming in the Dead Sea. The interesting thing is between the Holocaust Memorial and the Dead Sea, that one felt definitely more like we were in vacation mode rather than spiritual mode. So we're going to start with today or the Saturday, February 15th, and going to actually to Bethlehem, and then the Via Dolorosa in Jerusalem, and then hopefully get through the February 17th, also where we see the Church of the Resurrection, and then head to Galilee. So let's see what happens when we do that. So Saturday, February 15th, theme was Birth of Our Savior. Actually, we had Hecker quotes for each day, and the Hecker quote for that day was, a human being has a heart, a sensitive heart, a heart of flesh and blood. This heart, to be met, requires that God should come to it sensibly, come to it as flesh and blood. So celebrate that. We started out with breakfast at the hotel, had to show you that occasionally, and then went to Bethlehem to Shepherd's Field first, and the Sanctorum Angelorum et Pastors Chapel. We had Mass in a grotto there at Shepherd's Field. Then we headed over into Bethlehem to the Church of St. Catherine, which is right next to the Grotto of the Nativity. St. Catherine's is the Catholic one, the Grotto of Nativity is Orthodox. Visited the caves underneath there, Basilica of the Nativity, Bethlehem's Children's Home, and stopped at the Souvenir Center at the end. That's where I got the one thing that I did get. So let's look. Okay, so this was our typical breakfast. Plenty of food, usually some meat, a lot of fruit, and all kinds of mixed things. So we didn't die of starvation or anything. And yeah, actually, it was 3 buffet meals a day kind of thing. So, but then we headed down. Okay, here in the Old City, we headed on to Bethlehem. This is going through the all the fortifications, Israel's between the West Bank and the main part of Israel, but went down to Bethlehem and over to Bat Sur. That's the area just to the east of Bethlehem, and specifically where one of the shepherds' fields is. So this is the Franciscan shepherd's field. Down south a little ways is the Greek Orthodox shepherd's field. And so this would have been outside of Bethlehem, which is where the shepherds would have hung out. So this is heading down there. You can see one of the Israeli settlements there on the hills. They tend to put them up on the hills with big walls around them. Some different ruins as we're heading out there. And then we got to Shepherd's Field. That was over the top of the entrance. Nice, Jesus is the Good Shepherd there, heading down the pathway. And this is the chapel in the middle of Shepherd's Field.
Beautiful.
Inside is, as you can see, it's celebrating the birth of Jesus. So there's the main altar. The main altar, where is that? Okay. Keeping my notes because I don't know Latin that well, so I had to look it up. So, it means holy angels to the shepherd's chapel. Sanctorum Angelorum ad Pastores. And so, yeah, so this is the chapel of the angels sing to the shepherds, right? Interesting, so this would have been the angels appearing to shepherds. They made a real point. Notice the sheep really don't care that much. The boy and is looking up, and the others are like, "What the heck is this?" He made a focus. The dog was not really happy with this whole thing. This is a little scary, and so the dog is on guard, and the sheep are pretty much just hanging out. This would have been, on the edge of probably one of these caves, because that's where they tended to hang out. So you're along the edge of fields and caves. But the main part. So now the shepherds and the boy, you can see, are in the manger, which is in a grotto in this case, again in a cave, which was where they tended to put some of the sheep that needed to be protected a little more. They usually had mangers, feeding troughs, and such inside those caves more than anything. A nice view of that. The dog is there on the right, and quiet at this point. And then afterwards, they're heading home. The star is still going, and they're celebrating. You can see the boy is really celebrating. The dog is having a good time with that. And even the one shepherd is playing a pipe. But those are the images that are inside that chapel. Yeah. Yeehaw!
Father Don?
Yeah?
The first picture you showed us in the grotto, I think it was in the grotto area, and it showed the altar.
Uh-huh.
What's the significance of that leaf?
I have no idea. Oh, Canada. I suppose they must have paid.
Oh,
it's
okay.
Canada at the bottom.
Oh, okay.
1956. No, 54. I'm sorry. They built this.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I couldn't read that.
Oh, sorry about that. Little shepherd boys around outside holding it up.
Interesting.
Yeah. So.
Thank you. I was trying to make out what all that was.
Yeah, and it was a Canadian leaf. Yeah, and there's a close-up of
Mhm.
some shepherds on the sides of the altars, adoring, cowering, one of those. This is what the roof was like, ceiling. Let a lot of light in, actually, because I don't remember that one really had much for lights otherwise. Then near that whole area, they have excavations from the 4th through 6th centuries. There were Byzantine church and monastery here. And just, yeah, it was, most of what we're on is on the edge of this, but it just and one of the grottos inside, but it shows that there was once a really big complex around here during the 4th to 6th centuries. So there's ruins around, and mostly the ruins aren't really showing too much anymore. This is the big fountain in the middle, and shepherds, and a shepherd at the top, and sheep all over. And looking at the chapel. And this is up on a hill, so you can see down toward Bethlehem and such. My sister, of course. When we got this, we were getting ready to start Mass, and I couldn't resist this picture with Father Rich and "Do Not Touch High Voltage" right above him. So, but we actually were in a grotto. This is a cave. One of the traditional caves where it could happen. And you don't always, apparently groups don't always get in here. So we were lucky to get in. We just had to be careful because, like Rich here, if he lifts his head too hard, he's going to bang it on the rock. But it was wonderful having it right there, which would have been probably a location, it's big enough, especially that shepherds would have certainly used that for their flocks at the time. And the Mass, he preached, I was presiding. They have the special vestments for this day and this place. And so we would have been doing the, right around the Nativity, the shepherds, that would have been the main readings and all. And that's the, so that's the consecration. They found this interesting, one of our people, of seeing the reflection in the chalice of the little baby beforehand there that's at the front of the altar. So communion. And then they had these stars. They were lights. They almost looked like daylight, but they didn't. But we were taking some pictures. There's Trish and Dave, my sister and my brother-in-law. They had all kinds of little nativity scenes along the sides, some interesting ones. So this doesn't look like your typical shepherd. And yeah. But this one's a more traditional one. And then we're outside of there before I'm getting the vestments off, because the sacristy was separate. It's underneath where the bathrooms are there. There was this guy, Palestinian kid. He was holding a lamb, and for a small fee, would that we did what the heck, and cute little lamb, and that was just fun. Then we had lunch at Casanova in Bethlehem. We did a fair number of the Casanovas for lunch. This was the wall thing that they had on there. So the star shining, and you can see the three kings over here coming to Bethlehem, and here's Bethlehem with the grotto and shepherds and such. So there's a close-up of it. So this would have been Jesus and Joseph and Jesus and Mary afterwards. Pope Paul VI, this was in honor of him because he came there at one point and was at the grotto. I don't know. It's cool looking. One of the things you saw a lot of around there, especially apparently Greek Orthodox like this, is St. George and the Dragon.
Yeah.
So it was on buildings, statues, little things all over the place. So this was one, had to throw it in here somewhere. He's their big deal. So then we got to, this is St. Catherine's, Virgin and Martyr. And let's see, it's right next to the Orthodox, the Basilica of the Nativity. So this is the Catholic one next door. You can see where it says St. Catherine, Virgin and Martyr. This is St. Jerome, because they work together a lot. So that's apparently how Jerome looks in Latin. Hieronymus, okay. But so we were there, and it's right next door, and you can get into these big long lines to get into everything, especially to get down to the grotto, except that we happened to have gotten there early enough that it was getting ready. So you can see this is the front entrance, but we were getting fairly quickly in. Paula and Jerome again. This is the main nave of the Catholic Church. It's a really cool one. This is typical there too. I always thought it was sort of funny is whenever you have an event in the Bible, there's always these Franciscans hanging around the outside. It's like, well, they would have been there if they could have been there, Okay. But what it amounted, and St. Helena, what it amounted to, and these are pretty cool, nicely done actually. You can see they're carved wood, but they were getting ready for the certain times of the day. The Franciscans have the ability to go down and pray in the grotto, and a group that's with them with candles can go along, a small enough group, if they're there at the right time and get in and have the right connections. And guess what? Ma here had the connections, so we are sitting, getting ready. Here comes one of the monks, and there were a bunch of monks, and we're going down the stairs into the Grotto of the Nativity, which this is. You can see this is Orthodox. It's under the Orthodox Church. And, they have this scheduled, at times pilgrims get to go through, but then at times different religious groups, it's for them. And those are set times, and no one can change them, and they have to make sure they do it, or they might lose their time or something, so they do. But we had a series of singing and prayers, mostly in a language I couldn't understand throughout this. So here we are in it. This is as people are starting to head out at the end. If you can see here, there's this, it looks like a fireplace kind of thing more than anything. But actually the bottom has the star. This is silver, got stolen once and then got replaced. But this is the traditional place where Jesus was born, for some. Okay. And also now what they did was they went down to a lower level. I think Rich got this picture. So this back here to the left would have been where that first level is, but down on lower level, this is called the Grotto of the Manger. And it's an old, would have been carved out feeding trough back in here. And so some would argue that that was where Jesus then, after birth was, put in the manger, and it was down there. So the Franciscans prayed there, which was interesting. Few prayers at the top, but most of the prayers were down at that level. We couldn't see it other than this. This is the best picture anyone got. But we're all in this small little area with candles and mostly listening. Few smiles. My sister, younger sister and older sister there. My younger sister got this one. She likes all praying hands kind of things. This was one of the lamps that was just over the top of us. Let's see. I don't see if you can see it anywhere else. And it's just there. Then from there, we went down into what was a whole series of, in the caves underneath, chapels to different saints that it's underneath, somewhere between St. Catherine's and the Basilica. It's I think on the same level about as the grotto, but just sort of spread out. They did a lot of caves and all of these different little altars. I don't know if they ever used them. Probably, because it looks like they're set up pretty well. Let's see. These are, if you notice here, these are all of the O antiphons that come into the Liturgy of the Hours just before Christmas. And this is, you know, a grotto for Christmas. St. Jerome again, presbyter, priest, and doctor of the church there. And so remembering him. Let's see. But that was just under there, and that was sort of on the way out, so we got to see all those. And then we got to, this is the Basilica of the Nativity. This is the whole entrance. You'll notice that you can't stand up and go through it. You have to crouch down to get through it. It never seemed to be, I guess, for us, maybe the timing was good or something, so because it wasn't super, super crowded. And so you could get in and out pretty easily. You know, there are plenty of people, but not packed. This is a later church. I think this is this Crusader era, I think? But they have, you know, it's been fixed up and, you know, changed, that kind of stuff. So what they have here is a part of the floor from the 4th century church in the 300s, one of the earliest churches in this area. And that would have been the mosaic floor. And it was recently uncovered and restored so that people could see it again, because it had been filled in totally when they put in a layer above, when they fixed it or built it again or whatever. But that's there. There were, so that's a close-up of the mosaics, some real complex mosaics, pretty cool actually. On the wall, on the pillars, there's a lot of decorations. And then there's the mosaics. There were problems, I guess it was leaking, I think it was, that had destroyed a lot of them, but they've been recently restored and are looking really good. This is toward the far end, nearer the main altar, and you can see one heck of a lot of hanging lamps, typical of Orthodox churches. But you can see the mosaics, nicely restored, but you can see where some of the edges aren't, you know, had leaked and been destroyed, so they aren't there anymore. Unfortunately, I don't read Greek, so I have no idea what it really says. Nope. But interesting, has almost like a copy of the Basilica over the top, the way it looks. And different things. Probably apostles at this point. No, Eleazar. Okay, some of those. And, but, you know, very, very nice colors. It's the restoration had done very well. More of that where they had restored it. Not all the lamps were lit most of the time. Here's a group of other pilgrims that are all sitting there. Whether there was a prayer service or was going to be, we weren't there long enough, if there was, but almost looked like they were getting ready for something. But a lot of people milling around. There was this, apparently real popular, sticking your finger in these holes. And Christian, you know, a lot of Christians have through centuries, I guess. Here's Father Rich putting his fingers in. That was my sister before. But they're in the shape of a cross. And so you can get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all 5 of your fingers in there. Now we're back outside the Basilica. We came back out through that little teeny door because that's the only entrance and exit. And now we're actually back at St. Catherine's. This is just the hallway that's outside of that courtyard outside of St. Catherine's. You can see some pretty old stonework in that. They had this mosaic hanging on the wall, Bethlehem. So Shepherd's Field, Jerusalem's up that way, Basilica's here. The Milk Grotto of the Virgin Mary, we didn't go there, but there's apparently one of those too that's been there for a long, long time. I don't know where she went to feed the baby Jesus or something, or probably something on that order. So now we're heading out beyond that, having seen all of the St. Jerome and all of that thing. That was intriguing, though, especially, possible spot where Jesus was born. This would have been in Bethlehem. Certainly by the 300s, this was the place where Christians were worshiping. Okay, so then we went to the St. Vincent Guest House, they called it. There's another name too, but essentially it's sort of an orphanage. Here's the altar. This was supported by the French, so this was like Charles de Gaulle or something helped build this thing. It's a really nice little chapel. And there's a set of French sisters, that Algerian partly too, I think. And there's Maher, who's our guide there next to her. And she's explaining about it. What it amounts to is one of the things that's still true in Middle Eastern culture is, if a guy gets a girl pregnant and they're not married, he's off the hook, but she could get killed for it. And so there's a French hospital that, they let the child, if you have nice baggy clothes or something, you can get by with it for quite a while, and till like at least 7 months, so the child is viable, and then they'll do a C-section, which at least they won't get stoned. They still probably can't get married, or there are issues around getting married because the husband could see the scar, but otherwise at least they aren't killed by their families. But the children are left, and then so the children are brought from that hospital here, so really tragic. And the sisters take care of them up to about age 6, and then there's a separate school that they go to after this. But we were there meeting with a lot of the kids. There are a lot of different groups in France, and also some others that help, American too, that help support this place. The kids were having a blast. They enjoy us. Oh, there's one. He's like, huh? Here, he wanted to always be picked up. It worked. And showing them different things. And so then we're done with that. We're wandering through Bethlehem. There are a lot of these things that are similar but not quite to, they'd probably be sued in the U.S. for copyright infringement. Yeah, Stars and Bucks, has the same coloring and a coffee kind of thing, and it's like, oh, okay, that was fairly common in the West Bank areas. So now we're heading back through. It could be hard, and it was a long line trying to get back through, because Bethlehem, they put in a lot of these settlements around it, so it's very hard to get in from the West Bank to the Bethlehem area because you have all of these not only walls, but then they have these special roads that they put up that no one can cross or use except them to go to these different settlements. And so those all block off. And so, Bethlehem isn't quite a ghetto because they have one quarter that's still open, but otherwise, there's a lot of these kind of walls around there. Then we went to the Bethlehem Souvenir Center. The reason for this one, and it's like pretty detailed and all, the reason for this is anyone who's gone with Sister Albertine too, this one benefits mostly Palestinian Christians in the area. So that's the popular one, and they do have a lot of interesting stuff, as you can see. A lot of carvings from olive wood, but a lot of other things, and so everyone had a real blast buying stuff. Let's see. My sister likes the praying hands thing, so she had some pictures of these, but the olive wood kind of coloring is really impressive on all of these, and carvings are really, really nicely done. Most stuff isn't very cheap either. Look at this is the nativity scene, and baby Jesus, and shepherds and all that detail, and then all the thing around it is also part of it. It's a whole stand. It's one of those things, where would you store it when you're not using it around Christmas? But it's like very pretty and very elaborate. Here's a simpler one of the Last Supper. In this one, they actually use both sides of the table, unlike Michelangelo's version. And this guy in the back is supposedly like the innkeeper guy who's making sure that they get served. But I couldn't resist. These things were so pretty, and I loved the underneath how they had the wood here. This thing was like $7,000 or something. Uh, yeah, something way more than I could afford, but they still had some very, very nice things. This is one that I got, one of these. This is Forgiven is the title, and it's Jesus and so the soldier who nailed him to the cross, so he still has a spike in his hands and the hammer. And yeah, I get shook up a little bit on that. How Christ forgives us. So that's what's sitting on my table here to my right. But they have a lot of big carvings. This is a really impressive one. And let's see. They also had not just carvings, but this is Last Supper scene, but also you'll notice the nativity scene underneath. Good for Bethlehem. But it's it's a mineral of some kind. I forget what it is. But really cool looking. And they had a lot of these different things, some very nice quality. You can see the cross to the right. Could put that up on our altar, right? Then we're heading home, and it is getting near sunset. So, and that was that day. So that gets us through the birth of Jesus. Around all the stuff and with him. Then, actually, time for a little sip. So then on Sunday, so this is Sunday, we're going to be going to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. We actually have Mass there in their Blessed Sacrament Chapel. But so the theme is the passion, death, and resurrection of our Lord and Savior. To get where we want to go, especially getting through the streets easily, they suggested fairly early, so we left quite early. They even arranged for some breakfast earlier than they normally do, just so that we could be able to do this. But that was what the background here is, actually the mosaic that is in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So we start out to begin with going into Via Dolorosa, meaning the way of sorrow or sorrowful way, the way of the cross. Essentially, so here was our hotel. We walked over to the Church of the Flagellation, which is where we started, came down the Via Dolorosa, and I think we came in this way into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And so, yeah, not all that far from where we are. If you remember from some of you who saw the previous one, when they had actually, I think I sort of had that up. Let's see. Okay, this guy. Okay, so this was the model way back when. So this was the Antonia Fortress where Pontius Pilate was. You'll notice it's on the north side of the Temple Mount. He would have come down here out this gate to Calvary. None of this was there at the time because this wasn't built till 65. So this would have been outside the city over to Calvary. So it gives you a sense of where we're going here. There's a little close-up. And okay, so that's where we're going. So Via Dolorosa, it's still the street name. There's Rita, there's me on that one. Heading down the way, we started the Church of Flagellation. Let's just go back really quick. If you look, so if this is the Temple Mount, this area here would have been where the Antonia Fortress is. So Church of the Flagellation is right in the middle of where that fortress would have been. So that's where we're heading first. And certainly where Jesus would have been scourged. This was built this particular church was built in the 12th century and purchased by the Franciscans, fixed up, that kind of thing, since then, but it's been around for a while. So you can see the Crusader, the 12th century kind of look as we're coming up to it. And we're starting out with prayer. We're essentially doing the Stations of the Cross, starting here. So this is the first several through Jesus being condemned by Pilate and scourged. And yeah, Maximilio Dulce, he's the one who helped fix it up. Okay, so the way of the cross, and so the 1 and 2 are right here where we're starting. Then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 through 12, of course, all happen at the Holy Sepulchre. So this has been pretty much since about the 16th century. This is the path itself that's been, consistently used. Walking along, plenty of walls. Notice we're carrying a cross the whole time here. And so Armenian Catholic Patriarchy has the 3rd station, is right there. 4th station, most of them had symbols and then the station underneath like that. And we switched off, usually every station we switched off who's carrying the cross. And back and forth on that. So this would have been the 5th station, also on Dia Dolorosa. Some of them had a lot more, this elaborate, older, this is a Franciscan symbol. Usually had Jesus' hand, and then this is Francis's hand that has the stigmata, the wounds in the hand. And so usually it was Francis' arm and Jesus' arm is the symbol, and you see that in a lot of places. Okay, in the 5th station, Simon the Cyrenian carries the cross. And let's see, Aramaic, 6th station right there. And that's the emblem for it. Then we have the 7th station. Many of them have doors. It's not like they're open, or I think they're only open once a year or something like that. Father Ron would know. And but yeah, usually special places, but mostly we're carrying this. This one I had to have because this is my younger sister, this is my older sister, and that's my brother-in-law carrying it this time. And the 8th station. This one actually we go back and then we actually backtrack just a little bit because it's up this one blind alley. And there's Trish and Dave. Some of them have an old, this is a very old version of the station in the wall there too. And so it's fascinating some of the differences of different eras that some of this stuff has been around. Carrying it farther. Let's see, Father Rich was carrying that one somewhat too. We're getting close to the Holy Sepulchre. There's the entrance to the courtyard for the Holy Sepulchre. Had to say, oh yeah, let's make sure we know this. Essentially, we're coming into the entrance on this side. We'll see this a couple more times because we're going to start out here, but then we're going to head around to the Holy Tomb almost right away. But there's an outside area where Jesus has stripped the garments. This is the nailed to the cross. That's the Catholic side. The Calvary, which is the Orthodox side. There's also a lower level with St. Helens. I have some other pictures. The Franciscan church over here, this is actually, when I was looking, because I remember the Chapel of Mary Magdalene, we were at the back end of, this is now their Blessed Sacrament Chapel, and that's where we had Mass. So we're coming into the courtyard. As you can see, it's still fairly early morning, because sun hasn't even got down in the courtyard much yet. Over to the right, you can see this area. Here's a better view of it. The stairs going up. This chapel is the traditional place where Jesus was stripped of his garments just before he was nailed to a cross. So right next door. Once we get in, this is the mosaic that's against the wall. Has life of Jesus, the different parts of it. This is end of Calvary and being buried, so after his death. But then we're heading around to in order to get into line to get in the tomb before it got too long. When we got, then this is just some of the ceiling as we're looking up in the Holy Sepulchre, and some of the, it was really dim in the hallways, so that we got any picture at all, that's pretty amazing. So then this is where we're in line waiting. This is the front of the tomb of Jesus. And okay, a bigger view of that. There's the dome on the top, because there's a vestibule part and then the inner part where the tomb would have been. So then, of course, since we're sitting there waiting because there's a Coptic ceremony going on, and a Byzantine on the back, and a Byzantine ceremony Orthodox ceremony going down inside right now. So you can see no one's actually going in at this point. So we are taking pictures of us being there. And let's see, that's looking up at the dome over the top. A little close-up of the front. Again, a lot of, you can see the Orthodox run it because there's a lot of lights. And picture Jesus at the top. This was the group of the Coptics going back. Behind the tomb is this area that has sort of a fabric-y kind of enclosed area at the back of the tomb. That's for the Coptics. That's their special place. And so they were actually doing their own ceremony during part of this. When we're getting a little closer, you can see that there they are at the back. They had this, there's the lamp that's always going on the outside of it. Now we're getting around to the front, and you can see, you know, some of the casting on the lights, the candles that are on either side. Here's the main section right over the tomb. They only let us in 4 at a time because there, you know, there's not a lot of room in there. And so that's the decoration right above it. You can see the angels and things like that. Jesus at the top, the resurrection. He's got his banner there. These are a close-up of the candles. All the candles tended to be oil candles, so they weren't wax that burnt down. They were oil, so that the candles stayed the same and just replaced the insides. This was, my sister took this picture because notice here's Maher saying, don't take a picture. She took it anyway. I'm probably saying, don't take a picture. She took it anyway, so I decided to include it because we're not supposed to have these pictures. This is the inside, the inner tomb. This is one of those places where we're really quite sure that's what happened and where it happened. Where Jesus was buried was in here. As we come out on the looking back the other way, so looking this way, the tomb is right behind us. There's this other small chapel and altar, and there was a mass going on in there. Okay, so we'd come around. You can see the Coptic chapel. There's a Jacobite chapel at the back. So we came in, we went around this area, and we're waiting in line here, and came down, went into the tomb, and now we're coming back out. There's a shrine we'll see there, but then we'll be heading up to Calvary next. So that shrine, it's traditionally the place where the women stood as they were watching Jesus dying on the cross. So now we're heading up the stairs, and we're back up on the level where Jesus, this is the Catholic side. You'll notice the decorations, and where Jesus was nailed to the cross is the tradition that this happened right here. So, you know, Isaac, you know, Abraham being stopped by the angel from sacrificing Isaac. That's one of the images they have there. Different prophets, kings up top. And I didn't have time to translate any of those, so I don't know who they are. But a scholar type like Father Bob probably could figure it all out. This is looking across to the Orthodox side. So at this point, there's no Mass, so we're being funneled across the Catholic side and then across the front. So the Orthodox area is pretty open, but this is blocked off because everyone's coming from this side. But you can see, again, all of the lamps. What I found interesting, just going back just really quick, the Catholic side, all of these are real intricate mosaics. These look more like frescoes on the Orthodox side, and which was interesting, just some of the different look to it. So you can see some of the things, you know, so here's Jesus probably being condemned by the Sanhedrin there, or no, maybe that's stripped of garments, not exactly. And Simon of Cyrene probably carrying the cross at this point. And the different views, definitely a lot of, not all are lit, but definitely some of them are. And at times they say like once a year or something is when they light them all. Back to the Catholic side mosaics, this one had a little damage, but otherwise you can see Jesus' agony of the garden look there. So then this is the altar right at the front of the Catholic side, and the mosaic is Jesus being nailed to the cross. And so that's the actual altar itself. Then we're crossing over to the, between the two chapels is Mary, and the sword shall pierce the heart of Mary. So they have that dramatized right in the middle between them. I was curious when this was done, because this looks somewhat later than most of the mosaics and all that kind of thing. So I'm not sure when this was actually executed or not. So this is the back behind the altar on the Orthodox side, on the Calvary side. So and there's their altar, with the decorations above it. This is where you get down and you can reach through this hole, through this plate, down to touch the rock underneath, which is the Rock of Calvary. That's the decoration on top. There's a close-up of part of the rock. And this is some of the, again, the paintings around the outside. And we touch the rock, and then we're coming off. Well, you can see that here. So we're milling around afterwards as all our group is getting through before we headed to the next thing. So then we start heading downstairs. A lot of different decorations all over the place, that's for sure. We ended out back because we're probably getting ready for our Mass, but you'll notice that we actually got to see in the Jacobite chapel. So these are the Jacobites there. It's behind the tomb. They have their own chapel, and they're getting ready where it looks like they were celebrating Mass. And since we were walking by, we could take a couple pictures. So then he was showing us some of the structure just before Mass, how they did it, and I have a close-up of this kind of thing. Essentially, this was rock and such around it, and they cut all of this away in the early 300s when they put the first Holy Sepulchre Chapel in and built this. It's been, I think, repaired at least once, and I have a couple better ones. So this gives you a sense of it. From what this was cut away, so now you can see where it was. It holds up, and you can see here now St. Helena's Chapel will be going down there is actually at a lower level, underneath the ground floor everywhere else. But yeah, you can see where they cut away a lot of rock when they wanted to build this thing nice and flat. And so that's why Calvary is up the stairs, because they cut up all around it, and it's up on top of the rock. And it would have been outside the walls and would have been up a little higher because they wanted everyone to know. If you're crucifying things, the Romans wanted to make sure that you knew that this was an awful death, so you didn't upset them, so that you would suffer the same fate. So they tended to put it up. It was on one of the main routes going west out of Jerusalem, close by the road right there and the main entrance, so that everyone could see it. That's what they wanted. And so then afterwards, right next door, we went to the Blessed Sacrament Chapel. So here's the Blessed Sacrament Chapel where we will be having Mass. Afterwards, we'll go back down to St. Helena. So essentially, we looped around here a couple times. And this was their sort of a stark version of the Stations of the Cross along the one wall. Pretty interesting, actually. Yeah, sort of fascinating in an interesting way. Franciscan, I guess. All the way down to resurrection at the end. Okay, here's the soldier stabbing, a close-up. But this is the Blessed Sacrament Chapel, and we had Mass there. He was presiding, I was preaching at this one, so I get to preach. It would have been Easter Sunday service for this, so it's like, wow, the resurrection. It was rather cool, actually. A very nice chapel. Once we were done, this is looking the back of the chapel, away from the altar. You can see this area, an upper area, set up like choir stalls for which you would see for a monastery, kind of. So you could see that it's likely the Franciscans would have had that at that time. Now we're coming out, looking up in part of the dome, the secondary dome, with Jesus at the top. A lot of the different artwork, most of it I didn't have any specifics on what it was, but was looking cool, so I kept taking pictures. This is a piece of the pillar that Jesus had been scourged against, whether that's true or not, but was one of what they had for that. And just, again, a lot of artwork around there. This is looking at that mosaic again. You can see the crucifixion was at this one taken down from the cross and with Mary, and then this being put into the tomb. And this is the middle part when he had been taken down from the cross, and this is when they're taking him down from the cross. So the three parts of it. It's interesting they put the bones underneath Calvary here, a skull and crossbones. looking back at that shrine. But you can see again, the artwork behind it. But this would have been, again, where they would have stood looking backwards, because it'd be the other way to where Calvary is watching the women that are watching Jesus. Okay, so then we're heading down, and we get into, this is the upper level of the chapel of St. Helena. Very colorful, that's for sure, and has like the evangelists around the outside, angels and such. This is the lower level chapel. Very ancient chapel. Parts of this look like it's very early. This chapel of St. Helena, the tradition is that this is a cave sort of underneath where she found the true cross, that it was still preserved. And let's see, there's frescoes from really ancient, they're covered now to preserve people from touching them, but they're, again, a long way back too. There's the dome, Jesus as King, Christ the King sort of image there. And you can see elaborate chandeliers. What's interesting, that the floor, however, that they have shown again and preserved, this is again, you can see it's the pattern is, this is 300s, 4th century floor, would have been in the church in the 4th century, the first one that was built. Ark there. Some of the different, let's see, I couldn't figure all of them out, but I'm sure they all have meaning. Then as we're heading upstairs, back up, there's the wall along here that has all these crosses that are carved in over centuries, all the pilgrims that have been coming for the different centuries, and a lot of them carve pictures. They told us not to, and we were good, we didn't. But yeah, you can see they're probably still carving them out there. All the Jerusalem cross, though, you'll notice with the flare at the end. As we're coming out, this is one of the pillars that cracked at some point. If he said there was some significance, I didn't quite get it. But it's certainly one, again, it's been carved and touched by a lot of people. You can see how this area is smoother and brighter, that a lot of people have rubbed against that. And there's the ladder again. The status quo, you can't change anything. So this ladder that has no purpose anymore sits up there, and if it deteriorates too much, they had to get a new ladder, make a new ladder to replace it with, at least at one point so far. Part of me says, can't we all agree just get rid of the stupid ladder? But, you know, it doesn't, at least they don't attach any religious significance to it. So then we're heading up Greek Catholic Patriarchate Street. And what was right there was actually also the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Annunciation, Melkite Rite, the Greek Catholic Church. And since Maher, who's standing right there, our guide is Melkite Rite, it's like, and since we were going by, and we had a half hour to burn because where we were going to have lunch, we got through quicker. So they didn't quite open yet, so we actually had some extra time, so we went in here. So this would be Greek Catholic, well decorated. Looks like everything is pretty much decorated. The wall, I mean, very bright colored too. Jesus baptized there, all the different events of his life all the way around. And let's see, this would have been, you can see it was the wedding at Cana. They're getting some wine there, the way it looks. And let's see, that one I'm not quite sure. Well, who knows? And this would have been Mary and Joseph getting out of Dodge, the killing of the innocents. So they're probably heading to Egypt at this point. As we get down here, you can see this is the iconostasis. It's got all kinds of icons. And you can see peek through to the tabernacle is back there. The main altar is back there too, behind this. And you can see there's a little area up top where you can see there's some depth to it. And in the Orthodox tradition, the idea is that the priest goes back there. That's sort of, well, I heard it described as sort of part of heaven back there. And so the consecration where God, where Christ consecrates and becomes the present in the bread and the wine happens back there. And then afterwards, you can hear the prayers and singing any of that that's going on there well enough, but you don't see it. And then the Eucharist is brought out to a table out here and then distributed to people. So that's the special place, a little more part of heaven, not just part of earth. And so they have that. This is their dome, Christ's teacher and different angels and such around the outside. The book. Here's the, as a cathedral, this would be the bishop's spot. Okay. Huh. Jesus breaking forth things. It's interesting just the detail in some of these. My guess is this is Jerome. And too much hair for Paul. And let's see. Yeah, so here you can see back, this is the iconostasis here, and you can see back into this area. It's actually pretty deep where the main altar is. This was just on the wall as we're heading out. I couldn't resist taking a picture. It's west is on the north side, on the upside. North is to the right, but has sort of a depiction of all of where we were. So most of the time we spend our time around here so far. Has some of the newer names on it, Ramallah, Ein Karim, and Sears Jericho, of course. Qumran would have been down that way. And then we'll be heading up later on up to there. Now we're back at, this is our sort of the main gathering room in our hotel on the lower level. It's the only place we had to gather. If you want, there's a bar at that end that's open in the evening. Right behind us is the main desk. Oh, so there's the main desk. And then the entrance is to the left. So then it was lunchtime, and we were back at a Casanova. And let's see, they took more pictures of this than I did, but I had to throw a few in to say, yes, we did eat. Okay, so now then that's lunch. So now it's the afternoon. This was, this is the old city where we spent the whole morning. Just sort of, if you remember, the first day the scale model was at the Israel Museum, which is about a mile or a little over west. Third day, we were at the Holocaust Museum, which is a little farther out. We went to Bethlehem on the fourth day, and then on this day, we were out to the Church of the Visitation. So we went past all this stuff again, out some of these different roads. Most of them seem windy and not too fast. For all the fact that you're going like a mile to 5 miles, it can take a half hour or so. Out on the hillside, going around all the different corners. Looking out over, you can see some of just the ruins. They terraced everything to essentially trap as much water as they could, because most of the time it's pretty dry. That's the Church of, let's see, let me find my notes. I think it's Church of John the Baptist. Okay, lower countryside, Orthodox Church of En Karim. So this is the Orthodox Church in the city that the visitation happened. So, okay, just an Orthodox church. We stopped for ice cream. Actually, a very nice little place. Then you head up the steps. So the Church of the Visitation is up the hill, and so there's a lot of steps going up, and a lot of stuff was blooming yet, because they had had a wet winter and a lot of extra rain, and so we were seeing all of this. Everything was green and blooming at this time of year. It was very pretty, really. And as we're getting closer, you can see some of the stuff that's on the walls. Get to the Visitation Church. So this is the Church of the Visitation. You can see, of course, there's the mosaic on the wall of Mary coming in. We had some pictures with people. And yeah, Mary on the donkey. She didn't have to walk. That was great. Well, she'd have been pregnant, I suppose. So this is, all the way along is the Magnificat. And in all kinds of different languages. This is the English one. But you can see the whole wall is full of these going down. The wall is like 3 times longer than the part we can see. Although this is, I'm not sure when they did this one. It seems more modern, but this is, Mary and Elizabeth. Elizabeth would have been more pregnant at this point. And so heading up on the donkey, angels in attendance. So according to tradition, this is where Mary met her cousin Elizabeth and sang the hymn of praise, the Magnificat. So one suggestion actually was that Mary went to visit Elizabeth because she was pregnant and not married, and that way maybe no one at her home would notice and try to kill her, if that was, because that was also part of that, the honor killing kind of thing. So that was what some would argue. Other was that the assumption it would have been Joseph's, and as long as he didn't reject her, then it still would have been okay. But in any case, this is said to be the site. The first church was here. This would have been in the 300s again, that they would have first built it. But it's also said that in the grotto here was where Elizabeth hid John the Baptist during the slaughter of the innocents, so he didn't get killed along with all the others that were killed around them, because as we know, John would have been about the same age and lived. So that's part of what this church symbolizes. Over the hills, the Virgin is hurrying, bearing on her heart her treasure, the one true King of all the world, Redeemer of all humankind, Son of God. It's like a nice little prayer. And since this area was more sponsored by the Germans, there's always a German translation underneath, or probably the German original, and this could be the translation. It's hard to know which, but a German version. Inside, so this would have been Mary and Elizabeth meeting. Notice only women around, hanging out. This is said to be when Joachim was in the temple, when would have been when John was born, and or when, not believing that John would be born. This is the slaughter of the holy innocents, and notice an angel is getting Elizabeth and John the Baptist going off to the grotto to hide out during this time so that he's not killed. One of the altars there. This is the well that supposedly, that provides water actually for the area. So this would have been the well that they would have needed to drink from. Okay. There's a nice garden around it. So this was mostly the lower level. Now we're up to the upper level, because there's the lower church with the well under, and then there's the upper level, which is really big and grand. And so here's Mary, and of course here's the Franciscans honoring at the bottom. You can see there, and building the church. That's the model there. Okay, the altar, it was very interesting. Nicely detailed and colorful. Here's a front view of the smaller front altar. At the back this was a more modern one of the Madonna and Child, sort of Mother of the World kind of look. Regular ones, Pray for Us on the sides, and different depictions. Mary, Queen of Heaven on the right, certainly. And this would have been some Jesus and the Crusades and everything else, but very colorful again. And more modern, Middle Ages kind of things. All of the pillars had angels, all kinds of different angels all over it. And playing the violin, playing trumpets and drum with flowers. And then the mosaics along the floor, slightly more modern, but still in their style. All animals these were, which is interesting. I'm not sure why. Birds and etc. Then we're heading down again. This is part of the garden outside as we're heading back down the steps. They had this set up almost as though, very artfully done, as sort of like a, like a river kind of thing is what it looked like, more than anything. I wonder what it looked like in the summer when things were a lot drier. Not sure. Okay. And so this is hanging out on the end of the visitation and looking at things. And had to have a few pictures of us. And heading back down, it's quite a lot of steps. A lot easier going down than coming up, though. But you can see how far down we had. And then back to our hotel. This is the Jaffa Gate again, so we're usually dropped off and then walked the rest of the way. Went back up to the top so we could sort of get a night view, a little blurry, but still not too bad, from the top of the of our hotel. There's the Holy Sepulchre. They have a big lit up cross on top of the Holy Sepulchre. Looks like they have a little scaffolding up there too. Well, then Gene was doing this thing, balancing Coke bottles, because we all had some Cokes and Diet Cokes, and got them all balanced. I don't know how he does it, but yeah, he enjoys that, and they did. So, and that was the end of our day. Oh, okay, 2 days down. We got one more day we still want to do yet today. So we'll get through Jerusalem, and so today we finished up around Jerusalem and then drove up to Galilee. So we'll see the Church of the Resurrection, which could be Emmaus. It's one of the locations where they talk about Emmaus. So sorry, and we went to the Church of Our Lady of the Covenant, the convent. We actually had lunch there, really good. Then headed up to Galilee and saw a first century Galilean boat that they found. Dates directly from the first century. And then we get the boat ride on the Sea of Galilee. And then we get up to our place up north that we're staying for the next few nights, Pilgerhaus. So it's Benedictine, German Benedictine. And this is supposed to be an H, not a J, near Tiberias, the area of Israel where it is. So our goodbye to our hotel. They're loading up our luggage at this point because they took care of that for us. Dave finally got his sesame bread. We all got to share some, but we'd been talking about we should try that, and because you saw it all over around Jerusalem. Interesting enough, I didn't really see it up in Galilee. And so then we headed out first from the old city, out the road to Abu Ghosh, is however you say it, but that's how I probably say it, has the Church of the Resurrection, which is a Crusade-era church. It's considered, at that time, was considered one of the sites that could be Emmaus. It's about the right distance by some figuring. Okay. And then near there also was the convent of Our Lady of the Ark of Covenant, where we had lunch. So heading out of town, this is all staying within Israel itself, and so we'll head up the coast. One mosque nearby. Rita got a good picture of that. So then now we are at the Church of the Resurrection. Okay. Let's see. Make sure I have it. And the entrance there and the courtyard. You can see that this is, well, here you can sort of see, this is the old part and this is a newer part. This is a monastery, I believe, at this point. And happened to be a bakery in the building to the left, and a couple people went and bought something there, although I thought we had enough. So here again you can see the older Crusader-era church, and then a more modern structure, more blocky, that kind of thing. Let's see. There's Madonna and Child, and through the trees, and then we went down into the crypt below it. I'm not sure there was a lot of significance other than it was a crypt, but could see. But it would have been, the disciples on the road to Emmaus. So this probably what it would be is symbolizing the place where Jesus shared bread with the disciples before he disappeared and they rushed back to Jerusalem. And this is the upper church. This one it wasn't destroyed. It was built during the Crusades, and it wasn't destroyed during the Muslim occupation, but they did, since they weren't supposed to have images, Muslims didn't believe, they did pretty much destroy all the faces of all the artwork that was on there. So you'll see that throughout, and then some damage just from weather. So yeah, this for some reason was at the back. Don't ask me why. It was bright colored, did not seem to fit. Looks like where they have vestments and others, or at least supplies in there, but was there. You can see to the right is the organ. So maybe it's all the choir stuff, because there wasn't a lot of packaging around. So again, they wiped out most of the faces. One of the side altars. We ended up having Mass here, so obviously Jesus. So preaching again and presiding, and so then we're out. This had an extensive garden around it. Taking pictures. There's Father Rich and Rita. Got to have one of me, I guess. And so we're taking, and then flowers and A lot of flowering stuff, trees. I always found that the fascinating thing. Still looks like a squid to me, but you know. And my sister had a lot of the flowers. Oranges, they still had oranges on the trees. That one looked good enough to pick. And daffodils. You can see behind it a channel with water coming in. And here's the wider channel. Yeah, it's apparently an area, again, that has springs. And so there's just running water a lot of the time. So there's a fairly elaborate little canal system to water the whole garden pretty easily. And so we just see different trees around it. And so after that, we got out. They actually had locked the gate, so we had to get out the side gate. But then we went to the monastery of the Sisters of St. Joseph of the Apparition of Notre Dame, specifically Ark of the Covenant. And so this is the church. They did have some stuff out to sell on the left there, you can see. And some of the people our people were looking at it. Another group was in ahead of us. Just the grounds were really pretty. You're up on a hillside, you're looking down. This is Our Lady of La Vang, so it's Vietnamese, which is interesting. And if they had an explanation in the back, but none of it was English, so I couldn't figure it out. But Our Lady of La Vang from Vietnam. And let's see, so looking out, you can see out over the top along the way around it. It's a very pretty view. There's the front of their church looking down the valley, olive tree in the front there. There's the top statue. There's the olive tree, a lot of those around there. Dave was climbing in one. Here's the front of the church, the Virgin Mary Ark of the Covenant. Inside, fairly simple church, although they had some, again, ancient mosaic floors, along with, although most of the church is more modern than that. A picture of David, you know, playing the harp. Of course, St. Michael the Archangel. The ceiling was decorated that way. That's the main altar, of course, Virgin Mary on the left. There, flowers around, nicely detailed embroidery there too. To the right side, there was a separate little area. This is where the, I think it's the Mother Superiors primarily, are for the community are buried. On the other side was a small little side altar, Mary of the Ark of the Covenant. So here's a close, you can see that they're carrying just like they would have carried the old Ark of the Covenant, the Jews would have, but then it opens up into Mary and Jesus. Flowers, there were a lot of pretty flowers in the area. Everything was nice and green around there. As you can see, looking out over their courtyard. This was the building next to it, part of the convent, but also to the left, this was where their shop was, where we could buy stuff. They also had, I thought this was cute, little deer statues, white statues among the undergrowth. And this is the courtyard going into, over here is the dining room to the right, but a nice little courtyard. And then time to eat. And again, this was interesting. It's lit from the top inside. You can see the reddish look. And sort of, I was trying to figure it out, but it was like, you know, all kinds of different, you can see different jars inside, so I'm not exactly sure. So we started Abu Ghosh down in the south here, and I highlighted it. We essentially took the main interstate highway up. Somewhere in here, we cut across, because we did not go up to Haifa. We cut across through and up to get to Sea of Galilee up north, and ends out near Gezer is the city right there, which has the museum. So we went sailing up and around. One of the interesting things, this is sort of the topography of it. So we're starting up in the mountains, going along the plain, crossing through here, and then up that way. This is the Valley of Jezreel, or it's also called the Valley of Megiddo. And so the mountain near Megiddo, one of them, they picked one, is Ar Megiddo. So Armageddon, this was why, you know, supposedly the last battle was supposed to be. And it made sense to the, biblical writers, because whenever they're invading from, say, Egypt to get to Mesopotamia, they're going to come up the coast. You don't want to cross a huge desert. You don't want to really cross mountains. So if you come around here, this is really easy access through here. There's water all the way through. You get down here. You can take water up this way, and you're in through this whole thing and into the center part where, and so this was the normal invasion route from the coastal plain into the Euphrates Valley. And so, so the plain of Megiddo, and so the Mount of Megiddo, where Armageddon would happen. So we're heading up the coast at this point, interstate. You can see level highway, lots of traffic actually, and different people all around. We never saw the ocean. We never quite got that close. As we're getting farther north, we also see some cliffs and such. I don't know if there's ocean somewhere there, and some high ground as we're crossing through into the plain of Megiddo. Then this is the plain of Megiddo. They're taking water. Well, they had a green year, so everything's green anyway. Although they take water out of the Sea of Galilee to pretty much, that's the main water source for all of Israel. But you can see nice, flat, easy, and there's a river that goes through most of the way too. So you have a nice source of water. So you could see where armies would find this an easy way to go rather than all the other things. So then we came in. To begin with, we're going to see the ancient boat. This is where the museum is that we're stopping, ancient Galilean boat, and then we do the boat ride from here. And then we're going up to Tabgha, which is Pilger House, is where we're staying, and it's right on the water also. The thing that I found when I was looking up stuff when we were getting near there is I was surprised that the Sea of Galilee is like 700 feet below sea level. And it's like, huh? I sort of expect a high, only the Dead Sea was supposed to be, but no, it's actually quite a bit below sea level. So I added this down on the lower left here, that has the Jordan River elevations. So you can see Mediterranean sea level, so that Sea of Galilee is in this depression down here, significantly below the sea level, and then you get down to the Dead Sea, and then that's depression is way down. It's actually, so that's 1,400 feet below sea level in the top of the Dead Sea, but the bottom is another 1,300 feet down, if I remember correctly. So it's like, Sea of Galilee, if there was an opening to the Mediterranean, it would be all underwater. Okay, so you can see where it has like the ancient Galilean boat and the name of the museum that we're heading to right here. Okay, so we get to the shore of the Sea of Galilee. This is our first view. Can't miss, it's like, and as we're coming in, couldn't resist some pictures of some of the artwork they have on the front. Don't ask me what that is, but it sort of is weird and interesting. And this is the main museum, the Elan Center, Yigal Elan Center, or Yigal, okay. And we get inside, and they have a lot of different things. This is a depiction of when they found it. Essentially, there was real low water at one point, and they found this remains of this boat, and ancient boat. And so they put, how do you get it and save it and all that? And what they ended up using was they put styrofoam, foamed all the way around it and that kind of stuff, so that they could float it up, keep it wet, get it inside where they could, again, keep it wet as they researched how to preserve it. This is what the boat would have looked like about. And an example of it here at the back, you can see the front end of that foamed area that when they were bringing up, that's what it sort of was looking like at the time. Who did it belong to? Well, it's like, to Jesus, not likely. To the fighters from Midgard, maybe, perhaps. To the fishermen from the Sea of Galilee, perhaps the most likely. This is what's left of it, though. You can see it. It's, dark, but mostly the lower level of the boat, the main hull. It was 1986 that a drought, the receding waters yielded a wooden object embedded in the silt. And as they looked, they dated it and all. It dates from the 1st century. Certain thing, let's see, the carbon dating is, and then is like from year 1 to maybe about 100 or so. But the pottery on board overlaps a little bit earlier till about 70. So most of the pottery dates before 70. So would have been just in that same era when Jesus was hanging around up there. Water was, they pumped it out. They finally, it took days. They were working hard to make sure they could preserve it. Close up, blurry, but you can sort of see all the ribbing and all that kind of stuff. Supported well on the outside now. An enclosed area, you can't touch it, but you can get fairly close to it. It was found on the western shore, a little ways south of where we are. Let's see, 2,000 years ago, this is what they used for fishing in these waters. So yeah, the thing that was really powerful when we were getting up here too was most of Jesus' ministry was up here around the Sea of Galilee, and stayed in Capernaum. His native town of Nazareth is nearby in the mountains, in the hills, and he hung out with fishermen and ministered to them and all of that, preached from the boats. You get the sense a lot of his faithful disciples were fishermen. And so it's like, it was interesting because, in Jerusalem, you're walking up high over, essentially the cities have been destroyed 3 times and rebuilt. So you're usually quite a bit higher than the streets Jesus would have walked. Here you're walking on the land that Jesus would have walked on. So now the boat is built mostly of oak and cedar, but has a lot of different, you get the sense that it was repaired by whatever they happened to have had handy when they were replacing missing parts. So you get the sense of wooden, this is primarily cedar and oak, but look at all the different pieces of all the different colors from all kinds of different types of wood that were part of it. Number indicators, yeah, the date, its construction shape, both typical of the Roman period. 1st century mosaic. This, you can see the mosaic that's around it. Carbon dating put it in the Second Temple period, and so did all the pottery, oil lamp, cooking, all that kind of stuff. So it fit the everything. And so then, so that was the boat. Then we got out. We're going to take a boat ride, Sea of Galilee. I was looking out, and the first thing I was like, wait a second, this is a sea. How can we see the far side so well? But actually, yeah, and I had to compare automatically to Lake George because the Paulists have a place up there, and I know that. And so it's about twice as wide as Lake George and half as long as the whole of Lake George, or as long as the lower section. So it's big, but not big, big, big. It's not Mediterranean Sea kind of thing. So you can see out there. Because of it's below sea level and the way the winds can circulate over the top and swirl around, you can get significant, fairly sudden storms and waves and that kind of stuff on this. And they've had that happen, so they know it. We hit a perfectly calm day pretty much when we were going to take our boat ride. It was a little rougher another day, but today it wasn't. Grass on the edge, probably because most of this would have been out of the water, in other years, but it's been a wet year, so it's a lot higher than it normally is. A lot of birds hanging out there, having lunch, one of the other boats, and then up some kind of building on the far side. Cormorant is what that looked like, actually. So here's some of our 2 sisters and some of my younger sister as we're looking out. Over here was this weird boat little thing, and not quite sure what it was supposed to be, but looks like it's covered almost in birds. Maybe it's depicted, but they also tended to do a lot of carvings. I thought first dinosaur, but actually no, it's just a carving of the boat into the side of the rock. And limestone is pretty easy to carve. The Jerusalem crosses. Star, don't ask me where that one is. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-sided star. One of the other little boats that was just hanging around, probably a water taxi-ish kind of thing. So there's one of the other boats out there. Ours was the King David. And as before us was this group, looked like high schooler types, mixed group. And it took a while for them to get off, but finally they did. And so we're getting on at this point. Settling in and heading out. And so we get a nice view. This is along the shore of the Sea of Galilee on the western shore. And here we are just hanging out. And it was actually very comfortable, beautiful day, and just not having to move too much. It was sort of nice. We did have some readings and a prayer service as we were starting out. They actually had a little party thing at the end. Tricia had one of the readings. So did I. And tips for the crew. You'll notice that's there too. But pictures of us, because you're just sailing along and not doing too much. As you know, when you're sailing along, there's not too much happening. Looking out toward the western shore there and up the valley. This was the way you'd go west from Tiberias, from this area, as you're heading into the hill country and through to the plain of Megiddo. But also, if you're heading to Nazareth, you'd be heading up that way. Birds out there, Trish and Rita. One of the other boats, the whole Reuben. Don't ask. Oh, okay. That's right, that's a biblical, that's one of the tribes. Okay, and the birds were following around. Apparently, I thought I saw them, that the reason they're doing is they actually were throwing feed out there for the birds, so they were going to collect and follow you. This is looking at the far side, part of the Golden Heights over there, because we're on the north side. This is, again, back on the west side. This is the Mount of the Beatitudes. So we'll see this in the next day or two. Next week, I suppose you guys will see it. But this is the thing that the building that's on top of the Mount of Beatitudes, and a close-up. And let's see. This is right near again where we'll be staying. But this is the Church of the Primacy of Peter. We'll see this again on the last day because we had Mass right by it and look out. There was also, I'm not sure whether this was a marker or a sunken boat, who knows, but it was out there, but the birds really liked it. They were hanging out on it. Looking to the north, and this was, and I have the name of it somewhere, but it's a Greek Orthodox Church monastery right near the site of Capernaum. And let's see, but we could see that from the shore as we're going along. But I mean, it was colorful, so it's like you got to take a picture of it. Me and all kinds of, as we're not crowded, so we're just mostly just relaxing and enjoying the day. There's my sister Rita. These birds that decided to come and check out if we were going to feed them, I think. Some little ones, sparrow types. We're getting ready to come in, so we're getting nearer sunset, and again looking up that valley. But you can see there's nothing much up on top of the hills. But a really pretty end of the day. And then some of the birds that were on the edge. Then we get to Pilger House. This is where we're staying. Benedictine monastery, Benedictine pilgrimage place, I think. And has a nice look. There was flowering around there too. They had on the back side, this was in the ground, white stones that were the fish, because that's the popular thing, because they were fishermen, so St. Peter's fish, which is tilapia. Down by the shore, you can see that it's dark because you can see some lights from buildings across the way, but we're right down along the shore, looking down toward Tiberias, and then looking north right along there. The interesting thing here is you'll notice that all these bushes are underwater. See, normally they wouldn't be. But with all of the rain they've had and the river the sea is so high that a lot of this stuff now is underwater that hasn't been for a while. They had a lot of nice flowers that showed up really well in this picture. And you can see it's getting a little darker. A nice little fountain. They had some color around here. A nice little courtyard. And succulents. Notice the shape of the fountain is like the fish again, because that's their main theme up here. Okay, so I think since we're about 8:30, that'll probably be long enough for tonight. That gets us through another 3 days, so if we should be able to, let's see, next week, be able to, let's see, where is it? Be able to finish up. So most of the time around Galilee. So we finished up around Jerusalem, and now we're up in Galilee. There were some powerful things that happened for me up there too. So we'll be talking about those next week.
This
Any
was
questions?
excellent.
Thanks. I am having a blast sharing this with you. It's just so exciting, and remembering all the pieces again, and sharing my excitement with you all.
Are you going to post all of it on the website where people can go back and look?
Yes, I can do both the pictures and also the recording, because I'll save the recording. So tomorrow I should get it up. There's only let me end the recording now. So thanks for being part of it. Those of you who are going to be seeing the recording.
Oh, thank you, Fuller.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
It was great.